Okay, Godslayer Incantations. You might know them as the Black Flame Incantations. They're the ones that the Godskins use, and all but one of them have the Black Flame status debuff effect thing on them. So we're also going to be taking a look at that effect today. But without any mucking around, I just want to get straight into the list, and we're going to start off with the titular Black Flame. Black Flame is about as default as spells get in this game. You just throw a fireball and it applies the Black Flame status on hit, and you can charge it for an AoE. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's basically just Flame Sling, but upgraded. It is still a little worse than Flame Fall Upon Them, in my opinion. You know, the split fireball where you throw it and it just creates a massive shotgun. But this is still a decent option. I believe those two spells are the same cost, actually. So you can take this if you like. It's very thematic, but I don't think it's very exceptional. It's just a fireball. That's really all I can say. It's a regular ass projectile. You can maybe hit people up ledges with this instead of doing a lightning bolt or something, but there's really not that much to consider. It's just, do you want a projectile? On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have Black Flame Ritual, and what this spell does is it creates a ring of fire around you that lasts for about 4 or 5 seconds, so it gives you time to cast another spell or do whatever while you've got this ring sort of protecting you. And you're supposed to use it to combo with other stuff, I believe, so it gets a little complicated to use. Now, I want to go over the negatives before I start gushing about this spell too much, because I really like it personally. This thing has a 42 faith requirement, which is actually pretty high. I know it doesn't sound like it by Elden Ring standards, where you got spells that cost fucking 70 points or whatever, but when you consider that a lot of faith builds are hybrids, you know, you got strength faith, arc faith, and int faith in there, there's actually a decent chance that a lot of incantation builds won't be able to meet this requirement, which is a shame, especially as you're going to see later, because I think this combos really well with dragon breaths. But moving on, it's also not got very good damage. It's nothing to write home about. It's only like a couple hundred. It's outclassed by the basic ass fireball that I just showed you in terms of damage. And sometimes it doesn't stagger. Most of the time it does. I think it has pretty high poison damage, but sometimes it won't. And if it's not staggering, then it's literally useless. So if you're fighting some dude in full bull goats or whatever, you might want to put this one away because it just won't work anymore. Now let me just talk about how this spell works against someone else who knows how this spell works. Because I know there's a couple of you viewers that are at that higher end of play and probably want to know how to use this in a duel or something. So let me just go over that real quick. Firstly, you can jump over this if it's uncharged. You can just straight up clear the top of it. The hitbox isn't as tall as the visual effects, so it's very easy to get over. And then there's a small bubble of space where you can attack the person who's doing the ritual. This is not a good situation to be in, because you, as the ritual caster, can just roll out and reposition and do whatever, whereas the opponent is now stuck in this bubble that they can't reasonably get out of unless they use a jump or something, which is really going to hurt their momentum and make it hard for them to chase you and put pressure on. So it's actually not that dangerous if they jump over it. Secondly, if this spell hits them late, which it can, feasibly, because the spell is out for quite a while, you can combo into it with an R1 or whatever, just any melee hit. Sort of like how Flaming Strike combos if you hit the fire part late. You can think of the timing like that. And that makes this a very potent option to make it hard for your opponent to play aggressive. because they're going to have bad positioning, and if they screw it up, they're going to eat like a 500-600 damage combo. So this spell is still viable at higher levels, and by higher levels I don't mean soul level, I mean like literally being better at the game. I think the spell still has a place. At lower levels, it's also really good. If your opponent isn't aggressing you properly, they're not applying the pressure to force you to react to them while you're in the ritual, you have free reign to cast whatever stupid high startup spell you want just in the middle of neutral. And that's why I said the Dragon Breaths are really good at this, because the weakness of Dragon Breaths is someone just running up and hitting you before you get it out, and this completely nullifies that. They can still throw a projectile or something, but they need to be quick. They need to react to the ritual coming out and immediately go for the fireball, which most low to mid-level players just don't know to do, so you're free to do whatever you want. Now here I am using Dragon Ice, because it's about the best Dragon Breath I have access to on my Faith build. Other spells you might want to try? Flame of Frenzy. Flame of Frenzy would be good for this, because it comes out at sort of that exact mid-range where someone who is waiting to hit you out of the ritual will be circling around. You can also use Aspect of the Crucible Horns, the shoulder tackle that comes out relatively fast. I mean, like, literally you move fast, not that it has fast startup. It's actually pretty slow on startup, that's why you need the ritual. I'm rambling. Point is, you can just get off whatever, and it's a lot of fun to work with. I would highly recommend you try it out if you're doing some sort of hybrid caster and you somehow have the faith, or if you're just not going for one theme, one class of incantations, and you like to mix and match. This is a good spell to mix and match with. I encourage you to test it out, because there are a couple other spells that I wish I had tried to actually get some footage for. I will say though, be wary of the terrain while you're using this spell. I mean, obviously if there's cover or something nearby for your opponent to hide behind, you probably shouldn't use this. And if they're a decent distance away, then you're just wasting FP. But what I mean is, slopes can make it a little weird. Primarily the problem is elevators. This spell doesn't function at all on elevators, which is a shame, because that's the exact sort of environment where you really, really want some protection. But yeah, just be aware of your surroundings when you're using it. Don't use it just stupidly when your opponent is halfway across the map like I did in that earlier clip. That was just me being way too thirsty for footage. But yeah, just think about it a little bit. Scouring Black Flame is just sort of whatever. The positives are that it threatens a very large range. It can do decent damage. Sometimes it does a double hit if your opponent is really close, and that will just give you way more damage. I can't really recreate this reliably, so I wouldn't count on it ever happening, but it's nice when it does. The negatives are that it's very easy to avoid, and this spell drifts upward really fast. Like, the range is much lower than it looks, because your opponent needs to be like at a slope upward from you to ever get hit by it. You can't really free aim the spell downward to try and increase its range and compensate, because then you'll just go into the floor and get nothing at all out of it. It's a little difficult to work with, but this spell is worth having. You can just throw it out when you and your opponent are doing silly shit in neutral, but it's really just not remarkable. Alright, Noble Presence. Woo! I love Noble Presence. I'm just kidding, this spell is very bad. I have a lot of footage of it that I don't think I'm going to use because the spell is bad in such a straightforward way. The startup is just a little too slow to be useful. The damage is honestly pathetic. I know you can boost it by wearing the Godskin Noble chest piece, the giant belly, which has awful fashion, by the way. You're a psychopath if you wear that thing. But it's also not good at gravity, which you would expect it to be good at. You look at it and would think that it's a side grade to Wrath of Gold, because it's literally the same spell but evil, and no, it can't knock people backwards. If you charge it, it will launch them upwards, which is arguably even worse because then they just land and get iframes, so it's harder for you to follow up off of that. It's just, don't use this one. This is one of those spells that I can just categorically say, don't use. The hitbox is centered in front of you and not on you, so it's very difficult to hit someone who's strafing around you or trying to go for a backstab or whatever. You can free aim to try and roll catch someone with this, but if they get hit by that, they are bad, and you should already be killing them, because for God's sake, they let themselves get roll caught by noble presence. Don't use it. I've said that a lot, just put it away. It's got no redeeming qualities. I don't know what you would use this for. Even among just the Godslayer Incantations, if you wanted a close range option that you have to predict your opponent with, you would just do Black Flame Ritual. That's a similar speed, similar damage, but you get more payoff. You get to combo with it. You get to fucking run away if you want. If you do Noble Presence, you just kind of die immediately after unless your opponent is shit. Is Black Flame Blade a worthwhile buff? No, not really. Like other faith weapon buffs, you're getting less flat out damage than you would if you were just running a Flame Art or a Sacred Infusion. It's even worse in the case of Black Flame Blade because the fire damage you get is only 65% of your incantation scaling, versus Electrify Armament giving you 75%. And I was pretty hard on that spell, so it surprised me to find out Black Flame Blade was even worse. Now, of course, there's the obvious, it applies the Black Flame status every time you hit your opponent. How much extra damage does that calculate into? Not a lot. From my experience, I was only getting like 40 or 50 extra points of damage per hit, which just isn't worth all of the effort you put into it. If you hit someone multiple times, the Black Flame effect doesn't stack, it doesn't do more damage, it just refreshes the length that the status is applied to them. So ideally, if you have a long combo like Spinning Slash or Stormcaller, you could maybe get a decent amount of damage off a Black Flame being applied over and over. But from my experience, it just wasn't a lot. I was getting maybe 100, 150 extra damage, when I could have just done Flame Art and then done Spinning Slash and just straight up killed them. It's not really worth it. The damage varies depending on your opponent's max health. It does a certain percentage. I think it's meant to be like 2 or 5%. The numbers aren't exact on the wiki, and I believe the reason for that is this damage, this true damage that's being applied by the effect, actually has to go through their fire defense before it does anything. So, you know, if they have high fire defense, then you're going to be getting less of that true damage that you're supposedly deserving. So I think it might actually be meant to do like 5%, but it ends up doing lower. It's just not very effective. The only real upside is doing chip damage through shields. You could maybe use an Urge Steel Dagger with this and get some good damage going if someone's just like crouching there with their fingerprint shield or whatever, but you know, they can still just hit you. They're not a sitting duck. They're not just going to let you kill them through like a minute straight of applying black flame to them. I tried this on the tree spear and got a relative degree of success, but I think that's more to do with the fact the tree spear is already an exceptional weapon. It's already a good faith weapon. It's already a great spear, which is honestly just one of the best weapon classes in the game. Even just using one of them, it's very powerful, and Black Flame wasn't actually boosting my AR that much, although it was nice to have. If you're applying it, it's best to be running or rolling all of the time, because the running and rolling animations for Black Flame Blade are way faster than the default just standing still. You can also apply it after a hit, so I think the ideal way to do this is just hit someone a bunch with your fast weapon, then immediately roll or just apply Black Flame Blade again, and then just keep hitting them, just keep wailing on them. You are gonna chew through so much fucking FP doing that though, like oh my god. Because you're applying this shit like once every 7 seconds or so. It's supposed to last 10 seconds, but the time that it takes you to actually apply the buff counts to that. You've still got end lag on the buff animation, and you know, it's assuming that you're going to hit someone within a few seconds of you applying this buff, which just isn't always the case. If you wanted a quick option to boost your damage, you could just do Flame Grant Me Strength. That works for the exact same builds, and it lasts longer than Black Flame Blade, and it's not taking up a weapon buff slot. It's hard to get room for a weapon buff because most infusions in this game are elemental. But yeah, I'm done rambling about it. It's not really worth doing, but you can bring it along if you like. It's still fun and it looks cool, but it is very much not good. Okay, we're coming towards the end now. The final incantation in the Godslayer class is Black Flame's Protection. And what it does is it gives you 35% resistance to physical damage, but it cuts all healing you receive by 20%. That is your Estus Flask, that is any regen, that is any healing incantations you use, all of it is cut. It still works out in your favor in the math. You're still getting like 15% extra life, but it varies. In a duel or a very fast fight where you can't heal, obviously this is just automatically worth taking. In an invasion, maybe. It's still a very good body buff. It's still one of the ones that is genuinely competing for that space in your body buff slot. But there's a lot of situations where you will be taking elemental damage in an invasion, a lot of big spells and weapon arts that are the real threats that are gonna one-shot you. You know, not everybody is doing Giant Hunt with a colossal sword and just trying to kill you with outright physical damage. I will say physical damage is the most common to just take wherever, because everybody's weapon is dealing at least partial physical damage, unless they're doing like the coded sword or the cipher parter or something like that. But it depends. That's really all I have to say here. It depends. Because if you're fighting a sorcerer who's doing almost entirely magic damage to you, then you're just nerfing yourself with this. You're shooting yourself in the foot by reducing the healing that you can receive. But if you're fighting some pure physical dude, great. This is top tier, automatically. It just really depends. So I would say bring the spell along with you, and if you suspect that there's going to be a lot of physical damage in your future, then use it. Obviously, you can't entirely predict when you're going to take physical damage. It's not like Dark Souls 3 where you can just look at a weapon and immediately kind of guess what damage type they're going for, what their build is. Because even if you correctly nail it down, you know, this is a strength build or whatever, they could just be having a fire infusion. You say, oh, this is a dex build, they could just have lightning. Every build has access to elemental damage now, so it's a little hit or miss. But this is still an excellent body buff. I would bring it along, I just wouldn't apply it immediately. I would wait to see if you can get some information on whether or not it'll be useful before you slap it on there. Because otherwise you're going to really start feeling that 20% reduced healing. Your flasks are going to be looking pretty filthy. But yeah, that is all I have for this video. Next is probably going to be the regular fire incantations, the ones that the giants use, the ones that the fire monks use. But that is a long way away if it does happen, as you can tell by looking at the upload schedule. But anyway, I'll see you later.